Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. Today I'm going to be revisiting a topic I talked about in episode 64, which is talking about Ozempic and essentially the GLP-1 agonists. I've learned a little bit more along the way, so I'm going to share a little bit more of what I've learned. This is one of those drugs where we need to just keep tracking it and keep looking at the evidence and keep looking at what happens as time goes on so that we know whether or not it's something that should be recommended. When I talk about this today as well, just clarifying, this is a drug that was originally used for people with diabetes. For the purposes of this, I'm actually not talking about it for people with diabetes. I think being treated by your doctor for things like diabetes is one thing. Taking a medication for weight loss is another. And I think that that's just consider I'm talking about this. If your doctor's prescribing it for diabetes, that's a different topic, and that's not what I'm talking about today. So essentially, these medications are used now, very popularly used. I think they're probably the most biggest selling medication now so far, I think. And they are medications that people do now use for weight loss. And you only have to look at Hollywood. Suddenly, all of the people who were all about not they're all kind of up in arms about the whole fat acceptance movement and the accept us as we are kind of thing. Gone out the window now that they've got this drug, so they're all losing a lot of weight. So looking at people like Oprah or what's the blonde actress now who is a comedian? I can't think of her name. Amy Poehler, I think is her name. But yeah, look at the Hollywood red carpet. They're all on Ozempic or a version of that. Almost all of them, and so it has become the popular drugs. And examples of GLP-1 agonists are Ozempic's one of them. It's semaglutide. We've also got liraglutide, which is Saxenda and Victoza. There's dulaglutide, which is Trulicity, and tirzepatide, I'm probably saying it wrong, which is Mounjaro. So these are all GLP-1 receptor agonists. Some are slightly different, whatever. But anyway, these are the medications that I'm talking about. So these are super popular. Everyone's using them. And my concern is, like I've said, if you go back to the first episode, you'll hear me talking about it. I think these drugs have their place. And I understand that some people in certain situations, if you're very obese and have major issues where your weight is affecting your life itself, then it's always like a balance of risk reward, right? So in those situations, I feel like sometimes these drugs can be very, very useful or have their place. In situations where it's kind of just about looking good on the catwalk or on not in the red carpet, I don't know if it's a good idea. We just don't know enough long term about these drugs to know that that's sort of a good idea. So, what we know is that there have been iterations of this drug around for a long time, but the ones that are out now are the most potent versions that have been on the market. So what the safety for the drugs that were less potent is it's not the same now because they are much more potent than they used to be. What we also know is that there are a lot of potential side effects. I talked about them a lot in the last episode, and they are not. It's interesting because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this never happens. That never happens." However, the warnings on the side of the box of the medication, when you look at those warnings, they are there based on the studies. So these are the things that happened during the studies. So they are there because they happened, right? So the sort of stuff that you'll see on the side of the box will be things like thyroid cancer, which is very rare, but it can happen. Things like intestinal blockage, stomach paralysis, pancreatitis. And the other thing that we're seeing now, this isn't on the side of the box, I don't think, but there seem to be there seem to be anecdotal evidence for visual loss. So some people are talking about visual loss as well. So that's anecdotal, but that, anecdotal still matters. We still need to pay attention to these things. So what we do know is that those things on the side of the box, they're there because of the study. So don't think that, they never happen. They do happen. That's why they're on the side of the box. Now, going back to about how this drug works and the issue with this strength of this drug is that so what these drugs are doing, they are a replica of a hormone that we have. So we have a hormone that's called GLP-1, and it's a satiety hormone. And so this hormone essentially will sort of slow down how your gastric emptying, slow down your digestion, and make you feel full for longer. And this is a replica. This is a replica of that hormone. Now, the issue is that, it's a peptide. It's called a peptide. The issue is that when we make the hormone ourselves, it hangs around in the body for 15 minutes. When you take this medication, it hangs around in the body for 7 days. I don't think we're meant to have that hormone that happening for 7 days, right? It's very different to 15 minutes. And so the concern is, well, something that your body allows for 15 minutes at a time, suddenly for 7 days, what's the issue there? And we do have GLP-1 receptors all over our body. So this isn't just about eating it. What else is it affecting? And we're starting to get some idea, but we don't know for sure. So what the other things I wanted to talk about in regards to this, so the things that we're seeing, the things that we're hearing about. So one is, and I talked about it a little bit in the last one, is suicidal ideation. So we're not seeing so far an increase in actually happening, but the ideation is there. And I talked about this more in the last episode, where I sort of talked about if you've been using food as your way of managing your stress and a way of managing your emotions, and you can't use food for that anymore, then maybe you're having like much stronger emotions that you're needing to deal with, and you don't know how to deal with them. So if you've always used food as your way to dampen your emotions or give you that dopamine boost or those kinds of things that we do with food, if you've always done that and then suddenly that your food is not the thing that you can do that with anymore, then, and you haven't learned how to deal with those emotions, then yes, it could certainly increase your risk of depression and anxiety and all of those stressful things. So I think we need to consider that if you're not changing other things and you suddenly start taking a drug that stops you from being able to use the thing that you have used to manage your mood, yeah, you are going to notice a difference. If you're using that to regulate your emotions, food to regulate your emotions and manage your emotions, suddenly you're not going to have that. So you will have that issue. So I talked about that a lot more in the last episode, but it's worth being aware of. So that's just something that, there's definitely a risk there. The other thing that that what we know is what happens is because it delays gastric emptying, which is your stomach emptying and sort of your digestion, how does that affect your microbiome? Well, we don't know. Like the gut bacteria, we know our gut bacteria, our microbiome affects everything. It affects our immune system. It affects our mood. It affects so many things. So having that adjusted because food's hanging around in our system for longer, we certainly know it could drive more things like SIBO and these sort of the bacterial overgrowths that cause IBS and those sorts of issues. We know it certainly can do that, but what else does it do? I don't know. We're just slowly learning this. What we also know is that they're having to rewrite protocols for anesthesia now, because what they're finding is, you used to fast for so long and be able to safely have your surgery. But now what's happening is people on these medications are aspirating in surgery, which is like where your food comes up and goes into your lungs, right? And that's happening because they've still got food in their system because they're on a medication that's slowing down the emptying of the food. So they're having to rewrite the protocols so that people aren't can't, that they stop eating for longer because the food's taking much longer to get through their system. That also, I know, I don't think they've changed protocols yet, but it makes me sort of out loud wondering if it's going to change the protocols for blood tests as well. Because if you're delaying gastric emptying, you're also delaying how quickly your blood glucose goes up from meals. And if you're doing a test that requires you to be fasting for so long so that you don't have any glucose effect on your bloodstream, I imagine you're going to have to go longer before you do blood tests. Otherwise, it's not going to be accurate. So I don't know if they've addressed that yet, but I suspect that is going to be an issue in the future that they're going to have to think about. They're going to have to manage. So, these are the things that they haven't thought about. The other thing is too that it would seem at this point that the way the medication works is you have to pretty much stay on it for life and for it to have that effect. And if you don't, then things go back to how they were. That's my understanding so far. So what does that look like, staying on a medication like this for life? What other effects does it have? What could happen in the future if you're needing to go on other medications for other reasons? Is this medication going to be a problem for that? So we just don't know the answer to these questions. The other thing that they're seeing in people who are on these medications, they're developing these things that are called a gastric bezoar. And what that is, I had to look up what it was myself. So it's a massive indigestible material. It's a bit like a fur ball, like a cat coughing up a fur ball. It's like that. So it's a massive indigestible material. And that sort of hardens and accumulates in the stomach. So because of this slowing down, what happens is people just end up with this hard mass that just hardens and sits in their stomach. And that can certainly lead to, that's why people can get these blockages in their digestive tract and feel unwell and all that sort of stuff. So apparently that this is something that they are seeing, that people who are on these medications have more risk of developing this gastric bezoar. So the verbal type thing, but that can be quite serious, right? So we're seeing this happening. So what we're also seeing is, like I said before, because this medication acts on the pleasure center of your brain, it does quieten down that food noise, which obviously that can be an advantage. So for people who do have an issue with addiction, and I don't usually like to use the term addiction in regards to food, I prefer to use habituation. There's a whole other episode where I've talked about that. Just Google Fiona Kane talking about addiction or something, you'll find it. But just because when we use the term addiction in relation to food, the issue is that our cure for addictions is usually abstinence, and you can't be abstinent from food. So just using that word is not helpful, but habituation is a word I use instead. But essentially, if you have a history of whether it's habituation to food or whether it's addiction to drugs, alcohol, other things, what they are finding is this is really useful. This medication is really useful for dampening that down. It really takes away that noise that people have in their brain for that sort of thing. So it potentially is a really useful treatment for people with those issues. So I can see that's another place where risk reward, it may or may not be worthwhile depending on the level of risk associated for that person in regards to that addiction, whatever that might be. So that's, instead of, because, with food, we kind of get that dopamine effect, that pleasure effect that we get in our brain. And if you're not getting, you don't get that when you're using this medication. So that could be a useful use for the medication. That ultra processed food gives us that really big dopamine hit. So yeah, that could be useful. So that might be a reason to use the medication. But the other issue is, another way of seeing it too, though, is that for a lot of people, and it might be in particular for people who don't have that, if you're kind of not particularly addictive person or don't really have that kind of those kinds of issues, then it might be more detrimental for those people, because what we're seeing overall is that people are having like lack of libido, lack of interest in life in general. So that sort of malaise and just lack of being interested and getting joy in life. And it's because it's taking away kind of desire of any kind. So whether that's desire for food or desire for sex or desire for life itself and things in life, that's sad, and that's a very kind of anti-human kind of thing, really, isn't it? Because even though I can imagine it could be really useful for someone who's got a severe issue that's life-threatening, for the average person, that risk reward, I don't know if that would add up. That you're losing that drive for things in your life. So again, it's always comes back down to a cost benefit, a cost benefit sort of stacking it up and seeing whether or not it's worthwhile. The other thing is that you do plateau on this medication eventually, and so that again, that's an issue. And so I don't know if they need to use different drugs or stronger drugs, or how they manage that, but that is an issue. They're also, I don't know if this is just in the US, but they're starting to recommend this medication for 6-year-olds. And I am absolutely against that. I just don't think you should be interfering at that age group of children. I think that there's other ways you can manage these issues for children. If we get all of this ultra processed food out of our system, that could be a really good start for it. So I think that is that's not healthy, and we just really don't understand what it's doing overall and what it could do to a growing brain, a growing body. So just the idea of proving that for 6-year-olds just horrifies me. As I said before, we've got these GLP-1 receptors all over our body. So we know how it's affecting weight, but how is it affecting other things? We just don't know. So what they're finding in the US is they're finding that micro doses can have similar effects, but without the severe side effects. So that could be a good way forward. However, there's a lot of people working against that, and I suspect it relates to the fact that they won't make as much money out of the medication if they're using microdoses, if compounding pharmacies are able to make it in that way. But that looks like for the future at some point, that looks like a positive thing, that maybe in the future that could be a good thing, where you can get the benefit of the drug with microdoses but without as many severe side effects. So that's something to look out for, or to maybe to push for in the future in regards to this medication, because that would be a good solution to really, really reduce the risks associated. So what is happening with this medication is, the way these GLP-1 agonists work is that what they do is they disrupt that vagus nerve connection to the brain, and that can, again, all right. So if you are someone who has that really severe obesity issue, then you already have a disrupted gut brain connection. Your vagus nerve is already disrupted because you have learned how to not listen to your body's signals, right? So you've absolutely disconnected from that. So a lot of people have disconnected from that. They're just not listening to their body signals. So again, those people are the ones that could potentially benefit from this medication, and do benefit from this medication. But if you have a really good sense of, you listen to your body, you listen to your body connection, you have a really good vagus connection, gut brain connection, you're going to lose that when you go on this medication. And that concerns me, because essentially one of the tenets of healing, one of the things I talk about with my clients all of the time, is learning how to listen to your body, learning how to be connected to your body, because I believe the more connected you can be to your body, the more you will look after it, the more you will nourish it. And so being on a medication that actively encourages and actively disconnects that, I believe, is really, really concerning. Also, the vagus nerve is involved in a lot of things in the body. So again, what does that affect? What else does that affect? So that to me is also quite a concern. What does that mean? What is that going to mean long term? I don't know. So I do have concerns about that. The other thing too is, I've talked about it before in the last episode where I was talking about things like muscle wastage. That is a real issue, muscle wastage. And we do need muscle especially as we get older. We need muscle to have function and to have independence as we get older. So anything that kind of can encourage muscle wastage, I get quite concerned about. People are certainly losing their hair as well. But the other thing that sort of came up earlier so in the beginning, they said that it seemed to be aging people, that people's faces were aging faster. And then they said, oh, no, it's just about weight loss in general. That whole thing that Madonna used to say about you can either have a nice backside or a nice face, one or the other, but you can't have both. And it's sort of kind of true in a way, I suppose, as we age. But it doesn't seem to be that it's just about the weight itself. So what we're hearing from is we're hearing from plastic surgeons. And plastic surgeons are actually saying that they've noticed that people aren't healing as well. And at the moment, they're trying to figure out what that's about. They're trying to sort of get at a bit of an idea of why is that the case. And something that they're discussing at the moment that they're thinking might be the case. I'm not saying this is absolute. This is just something they're discussing and something they're trying to figure out. But one of the theories they're going with is that they believe that the medications might be dampening the stem cells in the subdermal layer of your skin, which affects people's healing. We don't know that for a fact, but that's what they're guessing might be the case. Obviously, this could be a major issue. So, one, anything that affects your ability to heal, major issue. But secondly, overall, anything that affects your stem cells, which stem cells are so important for healing and for health, that's quite scary. That information. So that's something that we need to watch and listen for as well. So, again, on this, I'm still in that situation now where I'm not completely against these medications, but I think we really do need to look. Risk reward needs to be balanced, and it really needs to be that the reward is so great for you that the risk is worth it. And I think for like just the average person who just wants to lose a little bit of weight to fit into to go to their daughter's wedding or to get married or whatever, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it for largely healthy people who don't have a lot of weight to lose. I really don't think that that's a good risk benefit ratio. I just don't think that works in the favor of taking the medication. If you have severe addictions that are affecting your health and your life, or severe weight, severely overweight, and that's affecting your health and your life, then in those situations, and like I said before, right at the beginning, diabetes, that's kind of a different topic, but that it has its place there. 6-year-olds, no, definitely no, in my opinion. I just can't see a reason why that would be a good idea at this point in time, especially we just really don't have these long-term and a lot of long-term data, and a lot of this stuff we just don't know yet. We're just sort of figuring it out as we go along, which is why I've done this sort of second episode, just to keep talking about it and saying, okay, well, this is what we know so far, and over time we'll learn more and more. There are sort of natural GLP-1, natural things that influence our GLP-1 receptors, and those things are what I've always talked about with my patients, with my clients, and it's in regards to having protein with your every meal. Because when you have protein with every meal, that increases your GLP-1 and promotes satiety, so helps you feel fuller for longer. When you have dietary fiber, does the same thing, and it's when you have healthy fats, it does the same thing, and so anything that helps support a healthy bacteria growth in your stomach, in your body, in your digestive system overall, anything that helps encourage a healthy microbiome, and having the protein, the dietary fiber, the good fats, all of those things will make a big difference to your how long things sit in your stomach for, how quickly your blood sugar goes up, and how much you make of these GLP-1s, these natural GLP-1s in your body. So don't forget there are things you can do to support that just by the way you eat. There are also supplements that can be useful. We do know that berberine and curcumin and green tea extract can all be useful as well. There's been studies on those. They seem to improve this insulin sensitivity and GLP-1 secretion. Anything to do with supplements, though, I would get advice from someone like me, your naturopath or your doctor or your pharmacist or whoever it is that you trust. I wouldn't just go out and start taking them, especially if you have any health conditions and especially if you're on any medications. So they are supplements that we know can be useful, but again, like all things, they need to be measured risk reward, and they might have risks and they might not be beneficial depending on your medications and depending on any health conditions you have. So they are things, there are natural sort of things that affect the GLP-1s. But what I would say is just make sure you're having things like a little bit of fermented foods, a little bit of having good amount of healthy fats, having a good amount of protein with each meal, and just overall increasing your fiber, lots of veggies and a little bit of fruit, that kind of thing. All of that will just encourage your body to do this naturally, and that I think is a far better way of managing these issues than Ozempic. But like I've said before, everything comes down to risk reward, and you have to decide whether or not the risk is worth it and talk to your medical professional and monitor things, all of that stuff. Anyway, that's my latest update on where we're at with Ozempic and the GLP-1s as far as I'm aware. And I'll update you in the future if and when I learn more. But I think this is just something that needs to be watched. There might be some good that comes out of this medication. We might find that it's been a good thing, but we also might find it's damaged a lot of people along the way. So we've just really got to, I think what happens is we find something that's too much of a good thing and seems like such a good thing that everyone wants it, and not everyone should have it and not everyone will benefit from it. And that's my big concern. Anyway, please like, subscribe, share, comment, let me know and let me know your experiences as well. What's been good, what hasn't been, if you've tried these medications yourself. Anyway, I will, and this is where, like I've said before, I like to have real conversations about things that matter. And this is a very popular drug right now. This really, really matters. So we do need to be talking about it and continuing the conversation. So like I said, like, subscribe, share, rate, review, all of that sort of stuff. And I will see you all again next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.